Okay, we're in Peidal Halachos. Last time we spoke about the point that Adam Gadol made, that he said, if I say to somebody else that this issur is no good, that person has no right to believe me that the issur is no good, because I'm in the game or I work in Kashrus. For me, I'm a competitor to that other Rav Machshir, and therefore I should never, you can never trust those the people who tell you that information are not people who you could trust. Maybe you could trust people who are not involved in Kashrus, but then those people don't understand what they're looking at, so they wouldn't be able to accurately report it. Right, so
who's his own double?
For the tape, we're not saying. So anyhow, there's an open call, and therefore, Mamela, any person, in effect, what he's saying is, he wasn't in effect, it was in truth that he was saying was, any person who's a Shemer Torah Mitzvahs, who's otherwise a reputable person, that person, if he says that the food is kosher, then it's fine, you can eat it. No problems. Okay? We even said that he thought it was a mile in his way. He said that if we trust our way, and we make mistakes, we're up the creek. We do it his way. You always follow Erechen and Bisurin, you do what the Baruch wants from you, and you're always safe. Don't worry, even if you end up being treif, it doesn't make a difference. The Baruch told you to eat it, it's on you.
Let's say, I don't want you to raise us, but you heard that his policies of how he does things.
So we said...
Are you allowed to call him up and say, hey, how do you do this?
So we started, at the very beginning last time was, that we're only talking about when you say the person doesn't do a good job at what he does. If you know that the person has a weaker stand, then you call him up and say, Chanyanko, tell me, how often do you visit this plant? Or is it Chol Yisrael? What's your stand for this and this thing?
You understand the standards in inspection, the standards in Shidduch and Halacha.
Right, so all those kinds of, right, so we're talking about it not that on out of standing. You say is, he never shows up at his plant. I know that he never visits his plants. So that's just saying he's not doing a good job at what he's doing. If you'd call him, he would say he visits his plants. So, but if someone else said, nah, he doesn't do a good job. He doesn't know what he's looking at. So those are kinds of things that I'm taking someone's judgment. Okay, so today we're going to try to talk about some reasons why that's not correct, and why, in fact, we don't do what that person said. This Adam Gadol is saying, throw out recommendations. No such thing as recommendations. Just, if the person, find out if he's a Shemer Torah Mitzvahs. If he is, then you trust him. No problem. Okay. So, I'm going to start sort of from the end chronologically, which is, I was in Baltimore recently, so I asked Rabbi Heinemann what he thought about this. I asked him for his opinion on this thing. So he instantly responded. It was instant. He says, not a question. He says, Rabbi Hanan says that the rules of Nogeah are only for Dinei Mominus, maybe for Ishus. He says, but for issur v'heter there's no such thing because for issur v'heter, it's as much Nogeah to me as it's Nogeah to you. It's only as kosher or treif that's Nogeah to me as much. It's not more Nogeah to me than it is Nogeah to you, and therefore there's no such rule as a Nogeah b'davar when it comes to issur v'heter. The whole idea that's in the Choshen Mishpah part of Shulchan Aruch. In the Yerdei part of Shulchan Aruch, those rules don't apply. He says, Pashut Raya. He says, where do we know that Echanem Bisurim? So we talked about this a few weeks ago. How do we know Echanem Bisurim? From a Zava. No, Zava's Nogeah b'davar. Like she's talking about herself. She's saying this about something that's very personal, related to her. He says, so you see there that Nogeah b'davar doesn't make a difference. So I said, I won't think about it. That was news to me. So I said, okay, hold on, I'll go think about it. Anyhow, I went to find Rabbi Hanan. It's in a few places. No. So Rabbi Hanan, now, and then I came back to Rabbi Hanan a few days later and said to him, now that I saw it,
for 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, I said to him, there's a couple things. First of all is, the rayas that Rabbi Hanan brings are very, very similar. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but very similar to the Marit that we spoke about. We spoke about last time, the Marit says that you only consider a Nogeah b'davar if it's financial. If it's not a financial Nogeah, you just have some other reason why it's Nogeah to you, that doesn't count. We talked about it, it's a machlokes nachronim, whether that's true or not. And the rayas are very similar. I don't know if exactly, but you read the two of them together, it's like, wow, it sounds very similar, you're reading that. So it could be that they're dependent on one another. Either you say, for issur v'heter there's no Nogeahs, or if they're not financial, there's no Nogeahs. But in our case, we have a funny case here where it's issur v'heter with a financial side to it. Okay? Or say this a different way. Over here, it's not a question of the issur v'heter, like Yankee said. We're not talking about the issur v'heter. We're talking about, do I have a financial negeahs to it? I, the hashgacha, I don't like him because I want to get more business, and therefore I have a negeahs, and therefore don't believe me because of my financial negeahs. Okay, so it's a sort of a mix of cases. Okay, then there's another thing. Rabbi Chanan really doesn't say it about negeah b'davar. Rabbi Chanan says it about a karev. He says the rules of a karev. Rabbi Chanan is medayek. He says whenever the Gemara talks about it, he says karev or pasul. He says karev and apostle are not the same thing. Okay, and Rabbi Chanan talks about that a karev the reason why we don't believe him has nothing to do with his not being trusted. We even don't believe Kroivim when it has nothing to do with trusting him. The Gemara, he says, even if the Eidim are Kroivim to each other, all kinds of riots that he has, it has nothing to do with believing the person. If apostle is someone who we don't believe. A karev is somebody who has a different kind of, it's just a Xerish Kasser that's a psul. The psul of karev, Rabbi Chanan says, doesn't apply to issur v'heter. Okay? But he doesn't say this straight out, but he sure implies that the psul of pasul, which is a negeah b'davar, would apply, which is what we're talking about. We're not talking about a karev. In other words, a zava is the reason why she should potentially be possible because she's a karev, not because she's a negeah b'davar. Okay. Anyhow, so Rabbi Heinemann had some rights back, and we talked about this back and forth. Oh, I'm skipping some of those parts. We have more to do. But in the end, he says this. Just listen here. He says, if the people are Aruch people, then and they tell you that it's not a good hashgacha, then you believe them. He said that's the way it is. He said they're Aruch people. He says then you don't believe them. Okay, so. It's very interesting how he a number of times he kept using the word Aruch. Okay, he kept saying if they're Aruch people, and the feeling that came across was that he had something in mind. You know, about people who spread rumors who are not so Aruch. Okay, he wasn't saying what he meant. What did he say? Right.
I don't need more than just putting it.
Right. He didn't mean that they just happened to be Shem Shabbos. He meant this people who are really out there doing the same way.
You were involved. You didn't speak to him.
Okay. So he was in Eretz. He was away. So he was away. He didn't come back till the day. Okay. I didn't get to speak to him back. No, okay. So let's put that on the side. Rabbi Hanan is just like he thought he had this right from Rabbi Hanan, and there may be what to talk about. In the end, he said, "Listen here, if there are people, you play." Okay. So now, there's an answer that L'chora would answer our question: why should we trust the people? But before we get to this, I have to set something up just so you'll understand what I'm about to say. This Adam Gadol is saying everybody's negeah b'davar. We tried to say last time, well, maybe everyone's not negeah b'davar. Maybe, for example, as an example, what I just said, maybe to be in a negeah b'davar, you have to have a financial interest. And maybe people who work in hashgacha don't have a financial. Maybe my negeah, I'm not considered negeah, because if the CRC does better, does that trickle down to making me money? Maybe that's not considered financial. We talked about those. In other words, we said is, maybe it's not so negeah, and we said is, the person, whether he's a negeah, you then have to trace it back to the source. Trace it back to the person who reported the information. Not the person who reported the information, but the person who really is creating this information. Okay? As we said, if the mashgiach in a plant is the one who's creating the information and we're just repeating it, you have to say that guy is negeah b'davar. Some people might be negeah and some people might not. Okay, so we have two ways at this point. Comes along, whenever most people who I have said this thing to, which is, I said, this person said that everyone's a negeah b'davar, and therefore you can't trust anybody who will give you Kashrus information. So most people's reaction to that is, really? So that if so, you'll never know hashgacha is no good. If a guy is doing a horrible job, you'll never know. You should need everyone's hashgacha. That's many people's gut reaction to it, which is not a halachic reaction. So you'll never know. So you just go around, you'll never know. So it turns out that reaction that many people have actually might be the answer to our question. And that is it is. We've been looking at Siman Lamed Zayin. That's a Siman of a negeah b'davar, or what's called Yesh Lo Hano b'davar, a negeah b'davar. And we had talked about even till the second to last halacha, which is Chavalov, which where the Chaber said is, in these kind of things, look really carefully. Okay? Pay a lot of attention, dig to try to understand if a person has a negeah to it. Okay? At the very last halacha, in Chaf Beis, the Ramah says something. And he says, when it comes to shilas of Tzorchei ha'ir, things have to do with communal issues. He says the minhag is that we trust even a person who's negeah b'davar. I told you this whole sim about people who are negeah b'davar. We trust those people, and the reason is because if not that we would trust the people who are negeah b'davar, he says there would be no way to get our information. We're talking about what was the deal that the shul made with the chazan about how long his job is for and this and that. Well, the only people who know are the people in the city. There isn't anybody who knows except for the three guys who daven and shul together. Who else will know what deals we made or what the arrangements were or what happened? So if we won't trust the people who are negeah b'davar, we'll never know what happened. There isn't anybody else who's involved who's not in a Nogeah b'davar. And there's a similar halach in Lamed Hey. The Rama says the same thing in Lamed Hey, a few simon back, that there are in certain situations.
What's this first halacha?
It's in Lamed Zayin, the very list, Rama on Lamed Zayin, Chapez.
The other day?
Chosh Mishpah. And in Lamed Hey is a similar halacha that we believe Katanim and Nashim, who are usually not kosher la'edus, in certain situations where they're the only ones who could possibly know the information, we trust them also. Also, a minute also that we trust these people. In other words, it's the way that the place can say it's like a kibbul aliyah, we accept it to take their edus, because otherwise there'll be no way to down on certain situations, certain personal situations, whatever it is, that only Nashim and Katanim would know about. So we take their edus, even though, of course, Nashim and Katanim are not kosher edus. In certain situations, there's no other way to know the information, and therefore we trust Nashim and Katanim. And in our case, over here, we trust in the Nogeah b'davar because there's no other way to know what's going on. If not that the Nogeah b'davar will tell you. And okay, there are most talking about Tzorchei. Things that you live in a little town, who else is going to know the information except for the people in the town, and they're all Nogeah b'davar. So in that case, we believe in the Nogeah b'davar. So if that's true, if we would apply that to our situation, then we would say that how am I supposed to know if a hashgacha is a good job? The layperson has no way of figuring it out. He has no way of knowing whether the guy's doing a good job. Even if he walked into the plant, he wouldn't know. Of course, he's not even going to walk in, but even if he did. So our only way to know that information, whether someone is or is not doing a good job, is from other people in Hashgacha who cross paths with this person. They visit his plants, they interact with him, they have some dealings with him. So we may be stuck to say since that's the only way to know really whether the person is doing a good job or not, therefore then we're allowed to take a person who's in the Nogeah b'davar because or else we have no other choice.
But the person who's inspecting is also Nogeah b'davar. Maybe he wants to criticize, and perhaps...
That's what we're talking about. No, that's what we're talking about. That person is in Nogeah b'davar. The question is, so why we trust that person? Which we're saying it's true that, let's say, it's true he's in Nogeah b'davar, but the Rambam says, if the only way to know something is through persons who are in Nogeah b'davar, then we're trusting. There's no other way to know how I know if you're doing a good job in Hashgacha, unless he once visited your plant and he saw it.
Can't we look at the plant itself to see how complicated it is? Like, for sure, midaraisa, most places are kosher. You can go to. And then even midarabanan and everything, it just comes out. He doesn't really have to do an excellent job.
He's not doing hashgacha.
The question is if he's not doing anything. Let's say they're making.
They're making a nothing with
I'm not talking about. Let's say they're making grape juice.
Yeah.
So
So therefore, we have to look to see what are they making. That's question number one.
I know, but we're talking about something that needs hashgacha to it. So we're talking about something that's
oil company.
Kosher sensitive.
Okay, so now what comes out now is punk fakir from what we thought until now. Punk fakir, which is this Abel Gogol says everybody's in the Nogeah b'davar. According to that, everyone's in the Nogeah b'davar. The Rambam says fine, believe them all. Doesn't make a difference. You can believe everybody. But if you listen to me and you say, no, most of the people are not in the Nogeah b'davar. Most of the people, because it's not financial, or because it's not personal, or they don't have anything to gain from it. If you listen to me, then the Rambam doesn't apply. Because if you listen to me, that many people are not in the Nogeah b'davar, then you have to weed out those people. When you call up someone and say to them, tell me, is this and this hashgacha good? They'll say to you, no, it's not good. Now you have to say, wait a second. Is he in the Nogeah or is he not in the Nogeah? So you say, really, Beryl, how did you know that information? He says, oh, I don't know, I never visited the place, but I heard it from him, and trace it back to who it came from, and find, it'll come out, you have to find out the person. Now you'll have to do more work, according to the way I'm saying it now, is that if the only reason to trust the person is because otherwise we'll know nothing, there's no way to know anything, then you could trust everybody. If you say, but you trust it because we have no other way of knowing it, but I'm saying only some people are in the Nogeah, then you really have to weed them out. In our stories from last week, you'd have to weed out some of those stories. We would say he's Nogeah, and some of them he's not, and we'd have to then believe it sometimes and not believe it other times. Okay?
Rabbi, we hear here in the office where I go up to so and so and ask them what's it says. They want that company, so therefore they're not saying. We do.
Okay. We have one last part to deal with, and that is, let's say either because of this Ramah, or we say because of our own reasons, or whatever reason we have, Rabbi Heinemann's reason, we have some reason why we're willing to trust the person, that even though he seems to be in the Nogeah, but we're willing to trust the person. Okay? So now I have a question. So now we have two people in the room. I give hashgachas, and Rabbi Eisenbach walks in and says, I'm not doing a good job in my hashgacha. Okay? He said, I'm not doing a good job. And for whatever reason, even though Rabbi Eisenbach is the Nogeah, we're willing to trust him anyhow. Okay? We're willing to trust him anyhow. So the question is, why do we trust him more than me? He's saying, I'm not doing a good job. I'm saying I am doing a good job. So why, again, the first question, the question we've mainly been talking about is, why do we trust him at all? He's a Nogeah b'davar. So let's say we overcame that problem with Nogeah b'davar. But he says I'm not doing a good job. I says I am doing a good job. So why are you trusting him more than you trust me? What's the reason to take his word more than my word? Well, now we just have, so there are situations when we have two Eidim. And there's a few Darkei about it in Siman Aleph. We're going to get to Siman Aleph in a second. There's a few Darkei about it. What happens if the two Eidim came in separately? Meaning this guy gets Hashgacha in 10 plants, one guy visited this plant, and so he was doing a bad job, and one guy visited that plant. So we have two Eidim. So okay, there may be situations when we'll have two Eidim against the guy, and then we'll have reason to believe it. Okay, but in most cases, it's not two Eidim.
Why should two Eidim?
No, I'm questioning why are you trusting him more than me? Why should you trust you more than me about this information? You say it's treif, I say it's kosher, so why do you trust you more than me? So again, sometimes there'll be two Eidim to say that I'm not a good. Sometimes you'll say there are two Eidim that make me say that I'm no good. Two, and potentially even if they're separate Eidim, there's a bunch of Darkei about it. Okay, so now there's such a thing. It happens to be the Mechaber there in Siman Aleph when he talks about this situation. We'll get to this Mechaber in a second. He does say Mikol Mokum Hakol Lefi Mashu Adam. Okay, implying that there may be situations when you look at the two people and you say, him I know, he knows what he's doing. Him I'm not so sure about. I'll take his word on it.
What's the Mechaber talking about?
I'm getting to the Mechaber in a second. He's talking about this kind of a situation where you're judging between people. Okay. There's a Pischei Tshuva. He says like this. There was a person who was a Tzorchei in town. And the Tzorchei was on his deathbed. And the Rav comes in to see him. And the Tzorchei says to the Rav, you should know that I've been serving treif to people right and left. I don't know if every time he did it, but lots of the things he served was treif. Right and left he's been serving treif to people. And here he's on a deathbed. You see, he wants to be nisvada that he did all these things wrong, and I guess he is to wrong what he's supposed to do about it. I don't remember the whole story. What?
Past 3 days.
So he next week I'll fast 3 days. Right? So he tells this to the Rav. The Rav announces to everybody, whatever he has to say. Lo and behold, the guy lived. Maybe he did tshuva, so he lived. I don't know. So he lives. So now the guy gets up out of bed and he hears the Rav's going and announcing. The guy's food is with treif all along. He says, "What are you talking about? I never said that." So the guy denied that he was murdered to the Rav. The Rav's walking around saying that the Shayach told me that everything he's been serving is treif. And I said, "I said that? You're crazy. I haven't said that." He says, "You were dying last week. You told me no, never happened." Okay, so the Rav is saying that the Shayach told him that he's been making the food treif, and the Shayach says, I never said such a thing. Okay, so what's in it? So Shivas Tzin. The Shivas Tzin. So the Shivas Tzin says like this. He says, the Rav has more nemanis than the Shayach. Why? The people have put their trust in the Rav to make their decisions or to decide about these kind of things for them. Therefore, it's sort of like a kind of a kimli. They trust him more than they trust the Shayach. And therefore, when the Rav said it, the Rav is believed more than the Shayach is. So when the Rav says, the Shayach said it, and the Shayach says, I never said it, we believe the Rav because the Rav is the person to whom the people have put their trust into that person. So, you could potentially say that when you call up a Hashgacha, and you say to them, is this a reputable person? The people are putting their trust in these national Hashgachos to trust them. And this guy living on the street over there, whoever he is, it's not, he's just a regular person. And maybe you'll say, according to the Shivas Tzin, that we should say is the national Hashgacha has more credibility than the other person does.
What about the Heimish Hashgacha that goes against the national Hashgacha?
Right, so now they don't depend then on your situation. And also,
their constituents put their trust in Heimish.
No, I thought the other way. But then it comes out, then if your community wants to opt out of this system, and you want to go and do this Adam Gadol, I told you this time, he says, well, trust everybody. Look, this whole thing is going to be telling you, trust the national Hashgacha more than the other guys because I put your trust into you. Well, we could tell you plenty of rabbis who don't trust the national Hashgachos at all. And he says, so we'll believe everybody then, okay?
I want to just say something. I think Yesh Lachalik, and I think it's very. Now, what is that? If you see something, and you say, so for you it becomes issur. Okay, you can't issur for everybody else. When someone's a rabbi of a kehillah, he is the kehillah. he is the kilo, so it's not shot that he's neman more.
He doesn't say it's because he's the Rav of the kilo. He says it's because the people put their trust in that person, and therefore he's more neman. I'm going to give you.
Okay,
the point. The Rav is masculine.
The Rav, he is the kehila. The Rav is the kehila. So it's me.
You're saying a different answer. Wait a second. You're saying a different answer for this city, what they should have done.
But you've seen it applies to someone in another city.
Right. I'm not talking about what they should be in that city. Their dishes are long gone. We're just talking about what he answers. Okay, now, wait a second. One of the things that the Shiva talks about, that there's really a din about this thing, which is, when I say the story, you'll remember, a lady says that a Chacham told her that a certain Mara is Tahar.
Right.
And they go to the Rav, and the Rav says, no, I didn't say it was Tahar, I said it was Tamei. Okay, what's the din? It's a din shemar. The lady goes and says, I brought the Mara to the Rav, and he said it was Tahar. And the Rav says, no, I said it was Tamei. What's the din? The din is, you believe the Rav. But what's the reason? So the Shiva talks about that he says the reason for that is because we put our trust in this person. She, by showing him the Mara, is putting her trust in this person. And therefore, if he says, and I didn't say it, then he brings us, he said, this goes along with what he says, that if the person you put your trust in, that's who you believe in. Now, that's what the Shiva says. But that's not what the Shach says. The Shach brings the Ramban, this din comes from a Ran and a Ramban, and they say that the reason for this din is, the Ramban makes it like it's like an Xeris Akosov. He says that if someone is saying something from somebody else, the source automatically has more credibility than the person who's reporting the information. If I say that David told me this thing, well then, if David says otherwise, then why would you believe me? He's the source of this. So he's the one who said it. So in the case of the Mara, the source is the Rav, and the Rav is the person with more credibility according to Shiva Tzin. But the case of the Shulchan is exactly the opposite. Right. In the case of the Shulchan is the source, and the Shulchan and the Rav is the one you put your trust in. So really, the simple reading of the way the Shach says, it's Ramban, is that in the case of the Shulchan, you should believe the Shulchan, because the Shulchan is the source of the information. The Rav is saying, the Shulchan told me this. Well, the Shulchan says he didn't say it. So the way the Ramban sure seems, it's the simple reading of the Ramban is that you believe the source, not that you believe the more credible person. The reason you believe in the Rav in the case of the Mara is because the lady saying the Rav told me. Well, the Rav, it's the Rav, and the Rav tells you not like that. So, again,
it could be different. That maybe the Ramban will be moted to the shop will be moted there because there's a race on the guy who's dying. Right. Somebody who's dying
is what?
He wants to do tshuva.
He said I didn't say it. He said I didn't say it when I was dying.
He says now he's not dying, so he doesn't want to look bad.
No, it's in the right correct. How do you know? No, I told you again, nobody, you remember in the Hamra condition when they would have heard it, right?
No, just the Rav. There was a private conversation.
It's probably not denying that he was dying. There's not a million.
No, he knows he was dying, but he said I never said that. The Rav made it up.
So obviously there was nobody else there, right?
Right.
So maybe nobody. Somebody was dying.
I saw the Shach and the Ramban. The Shiva seen did. So I guess he's learning that what he said. Wait, I think for some he thinks that that's the Shach and the Ramban. The Ramban says we believe the person who it's coming from rather than the person who's saying it over. He'll read into that. It's not the simple reading, but he'll read into that. Because that person is who we put our trust in. If the lady told the Mara to the Rav, she put her trust into him. He's reading like that. It's not the simple reading of the Ramban. Okay.
I don't see the whole question. Let's say we don't know who to believe more than the other, right? Well, believe the Tzorchei. Okay, good. People don't know what he's fakes. They don't want to Kashrus.
I think you're about to say I'm about to finish. And I was going to say is, we're making a big mistake. This din that we're talking about, you almost said it.
After all this, we're making a mistake.
The din we're talking about, I keep mentioning is that at the end of Siman Aleph in Yerideh, back to Yerideh, says, what this Pesach Tshuva is on is in the din of Shulchan. It says it like this. What happens if you have a shaykhid, you have a shaykhid, and somebody comes in and says the shaykhid didn't do a good job. I watched him shecht it, and that cow that's over there, he didn't shecht it right. I don't remember what the details were. He says he didn't shecht it right. What's the din? The din is, it's 8 echad b'hakosha. We don't believe the person coming in to say that he did a bad job, to the extent that the person himself who said the edus would be allowed to eat that meat, except for Shavi and Avshech Chetich B'Yisrael. Put them aside. But besides that, the person himself, the din is, it's 8 echad b'hakosha, and you're not allowed, to believe you don't believe the person coming in to say that the shaykhid did the bad job. The guy himself can eat. The next shechita that he does, that's what the Mechaber says. At the end, it's in,
I don't know what's the...
Are we talking about a sheikh that's muksud to be a
yes, he's a good shechita.
What does it mean, Eidach Malachosha? What is that?
There's two Eidim. There's an Eid Echad saying that he did a good shechita, and Echad that he
Saying by
didn't.
Yisur, Chalik Abichad...
And they cancel each other out, and we're left with
Who's the Echad? Himself?
the guy at the shaykhid says I did a good job, and the guy who's walking in says you did a bad job. You didn't do shechted properly.
Yeah, Kashrus is the shaykhid.
That's what I asked.
Okay, so
I don't put this one as Hashgachos. I just said he messed up this one. That's all.
No, he's
No.
the sheikh.
yeah, he did a bit. No, he's not doing his job properly. Not that. Not
good.
that.
One of Behemah he's talking about.
He is talking about it specifically. He says, I watched him chef the Behemah. He did a bad job. Not that he didn't notice it. He was obviously did a bad job, but he sold it as kosher anyhow. In other words, he's reporting that the shaykhid is sloppy, not sloppy.
Possible shaykhid, in other words.
Right.
Even now, you didn't...
Correct.
Right. He's not just saying that the shaykhid did a bad job and the shaykhid did a bad job. He didn't notice it by mistake. He didn't notice there was this little problem. He didn't even notice. No, I'm saying he noticed and he sold it anyhow. Okay. Okay, so now that would tell us that we should not believe. If you read this simply, you should say we should believe.
Kashrus.
If you read it simply, you're going to say to me, we should not believe the guy reporting. Even forget about his not gave it over. He's a good person. But if you're looking more carefully, you feel exactly the opposite. It's going to answer a question, and that is the Shach and Taz both argue on the Mechaber, and they both say that the animals, you're not allowed to eat the animal. And the reason why is because you have Eid Echad B'Chosha, and we have Ischazki Issur. The animal was treif until it was shafted, it was lois avua, and the animal, so there's a cheskes issur, and you're not allowed to eat the animal. Even the hesper that they give in the Mechaber, what's the pshat in the Mechaber? What happened to the cheskes issur? They says, well, there's a roiv between etzer shchita, she'em. So if we have an Eid Echad B'Chosha as to whether he did a good job or not, so ignore them. And what do we have? We have a piece of meat that was shafted by somebody, an unknown person, an unknown quantity, as to whether that person was or was not a shaykhid. The rule is, roiv between its shchita mubchanim, and therefore it's kosher. So, the shayla, what the machlokes is not our point, but our point is, in that case, there are special reasons why to be allowed to eat the meat. Okay, there's a roiv that tells us you should be allowed to eat the meat. In our case, it's punkt fakert. If we have Eid Echad B'Chosha, we have one aid saying he's a good hashgacha, one aid saying he's a bad hashgacha. So we say what? Eid Echad B'Chosha, what's it in? It's like they don't exist. So what are we left with? We're left with food that has no hashgacha. The food has no hashgacha. The Rav Machshir is saying it's kosher. The other person is saying it's not kosher. So what do we have? And they're b'chosher, so we ignore them. So what do we have? We have nobody telling us about the food. So we have a bottle of grape juice, and that bottle of grape juice, one guy says it's kosher, one guy says it's treif.
The label says it's kosher.
The label is saying kosher, and the other guy is saying it's not kosher. So we have Eid Echad B'Chosha, and we ignore them. Now we have a generic bottle of grape juice that has no hashgacha on it. We're ignoring the person saying it's kosher. Again, in the case of the shechita, we ignore the person saying it's kosher, and we have we have a reason to make it kosher. But over here, if we have no person saying it's kosher, because we cancel them off by the guy on the outside, what are we left?
The guy that has kashrus before he was done.
No, the Nidivit has a cheskes kashrus. His cheskes kashrus is against the Eid Echad who's saying he's not a good hashgacha.
No. Till now you have a cheskes kashrus. Till this might have happened, right?
This person had a cheskes kashrus.
And now there's two, and one says he's kosher, one is not kosher.
No. I'm
saying that food is kosher. I'm telling you that I made the food kosher. He says, you don't know what you're talking about. You did. The food is not kosher.
But till now, before this guy showed up, this person had a cheskes kashrus, then would have presumed the food is kosher.
And that's it. On that part of his cheskes kashrus says, Eid Echad B'Chosha. Right now, the shaykhid is not kosher anymore. It's Eid Echad B'Chosha on that. The only reason you have to eat the meat, you eat the meat not because the guy said, I'm a good shaykhid. You eat the meat because right between it's shchita mubchanim. It's as if we don't have any idea what the shaykhid is. We just found a piece of meat. Yeah, that's the reason why, because right between it's shchita mubchanim. We eat the meat because we don't know the shaykhid.
We found this piece of meat sitting here.
Right, that's correct. We found the piece of meat. We don't know who the shaykhid was. We knew who shechted. By Yid who shechted it. We don't have any idea who it was. It's automatically it's kosher. Right, that it's kosher. The fact that the person saying it's kosher, that was thrown out. His statement, I made this meat kosher, is worthless. Could be having Echad B'Chosha. So that's what goes on in our case. But in our case, we have no right. And in our case, it's like the Taz and the Shach. There's no right. We have a piece of meat. We have no idea whether it's kosher or not. We don't have any rights. We don't have anything. We have a food that needs hashgacha, and we don't have hashgacha.
But you don't go after a robe and it's essential of isn't it? After that, bring into another robe and find out if it's or not?
No, that's okay. You go on a similar. It's not again for this part.
Let's say the master
organization. There are other people who are also being made
They do a good job.
Yeah.
You're saying, so I said that there are cases when we'll have two agents say that he's puzzle. I mean, people in different planes. You're saying, wait a second, we have two agents on his side. He has all the people who work for him who all will corroborate that he's a good job. You say, okay, so that's a good point. So you say, we have a problem here, because if he's a freelance person, fine. But if he's working with a couple of people, let's say that someone said the CRC is no good. So the saying is, that's not just saying that Shalom Fishman doesn't do a job. It's David Oppenheim is going to vouch for Shalom, and we have more than him. Okay, that's a good question. I didn't think of that. So you think maybe then it's less reason to believe the person. Okay, that's a bottom line.